Our relationship led the way to our engagement during a small family gathering at a restaurant. None of my immediate family or relatives attended the occasion. We had a wonderful time when there was no Jehovah's Witness interference. We danced almost the whole night through, while Magda's relatives drank heavily, sharing some hysterical laughter and vulgar jokes. This is when we shared our vows and presented our engagement rings, which were later to become our wedding rings. We admired the beauty of the moon and our gold rings, which had both a matte and shiny finish, making them unique. On the inner side of them, our names were carved. We started making plans for the future, based mainly on Magda's wishes. She was hoping for a wonderful and eternal future in Jehovah's kingdom, together with me. I spoke about going overseas, buying our own property, and even starting a psychologist's practice. You can guess how she reacted to that. She put her hands in mine, looked directly in my eyes, and said, "We must first seek God's kingdom, and therefore we must not be too materialistic." Magda's parents decided to make our wedding ceremony very down-to-earth and simple, but with a good-looking suit for me and a very expensive wedding dress for her. During the evening, I still remember it as if it was yesterday. Emilia wanted to spend a little time with me, according to tradition, she said, and we went into an empty room within the restaurant complex. As already mentioned, she then engaged in unexpected and uninvited advances, touching me in all the wrong places, and placed her lips upon mine, obviously hoping I would enter into an intimate relationship with her. I'm so certain that she wanted to know what kind of man her daughter was going to live with by being just a little closer. To tell you the truth, I was really frightened, hoping somebody would enter the room and the situation would be over. As indicated, I felt the need to keep it a secret, because I did not want to create any complications. Even many years later, I did not say anything to Magda. Besides, she would not believe me anyway, for she had already made up her mind never to accept me. However, it had been so clearly etched in my mind that I can never forget it. It was unusual, unwelcome, and unexpected. My life has certainly been very colorful. I was extremely excited about the prospect of getting married, although I was still very young. I was a 20-year-old youth, and my youth, indeed my childhood, was literally stolen away from me due to circumstances I was forced into. Without being judgmental, my father had his own dreams, which did not match with that of our mother, who was working very hard and had started her business creating and making ladies' dress designs, both for Christian Dior as well as her own salon. His initial interests in getting rid of us boys, particularly me, as the firstborn, later demanding that we would be better educated once conscripted into military service in Turkey and not anywhere else, so that we may eventually claim some part of the property dating back to pre-1915, was no more than a very naive view. I knew that my brother also needed to break down the barriers, and after his success in obtaining scholarship funding, he made his way to the United States and was accepted at a university in West Virginia. This is also when our communication became very few and far between. After leaving those worrisome times behind, and studying in one of the universities in Germany, supporting myself through part-time employment, I felt tired. And especially facing possible deportation, it made the whole adventure look like a worthless endeavor. But being accepted by the Australian government changed the whole experience for the better. Being married to someone like Magda could be great for companionship if one was involved in the same belief system. However, I was not going to force her to accept everything I wanted to do. I was also not going to demand her to work, for I had proved to myself that I could work and study, have hobbies, and profit from them. I was a free agent, free to do anything, free to live, and be fulfilled with my own undertakings, and most importantly, help others to find some joy in living. I was going to practice psychology and create works of art, having exciting exhibitions in that wonderful country where I was accepted. But what were Magda's hopes and expectations? I can never forget how stunning she looked in her wedding dress on our important day. On Magda's insistence and her parents' demands, we were to have a semi-religious ceremony in a kingdom hall. Not agreeing with the arrangement, Magda's relatives were not willing to attend the event, and many of our friends did not see it as important to attend the ceremony either, although they all belonged to the Jehovah's Witness faith. Only Magda's parents and about 5 other witnesses were present. There was no music, no singing, and on the platform was an appointed minister. This was the beginning of a very restrictive and boring lifestyle with her. In theory, perhaps I was not seen as a suitable candidate to marry a German girl. Firstly, Magda was invited to go towards the platform with her father, and then I was invited to go there on my own. But instead of walking slowly to the platform, I hastily rushed there, to everyone's surprise. It felt like, let us get it over quickly. Maybe I was overly excited, or else felt somewhat embarrassed having a wedding ceremony like this in a kingdom hall, and was not too sure about what to do, as I was not familiar with the procedure. It felt empty and void of any excitement. This wedding ceremony was most certainly a different one compared with others, which we are familiar with. If I had waited for a few more years before getting married, it would have been better. But there were so many things happening all at once. Being accepted to emigrate to Australia after suffering uncertainty and fear of being deported from Germany was one of them. The news of my getting married excited my mother and hopefully made my father realize that I was never dependent on him and was not a male prostitute, as he believed all schoolies would become. Going back to our special day, we exchanged our I do's, and were asked to repeat our vows in front of these witnesses, and we were to stay faithful to each other. Afterwards we went back to Magda's parents, and then to our flat above the chemist shop. The next day we again dressed in our wedding outfits to visit a professional photographic studio to have our wedding photos taken. And we chose a beautiful black and white image one could be proud of. We received small presents from friends and Magda's relatives. Her mother gave me a separate gift containing a commode with a couple of sausages and lots of mild German mustard on top of them. When opening the cellophane packing and discovering the interesting gift, Magda laughed hysterically and explained that it was their tradition. Personally, I thought that it meant here is your first baby's shit, and enjoy your responsibilities in a fun way. How thoughtful. Both our engagement party and wedding were filmed on Super 8mm by Magda's aunt and mother, who had volunteered to do so. That was certainly very nice of them, but as I said before, the end result was nothing other than a complete blur and a smear of some color amongst other things. One could catch a glimpse of Magda's and my feet amidst the imagery uncaptured. Once the films were developed and delivered to our address, and after discovering Emilia and her sister's artwork, I decided to invite them to view the footage they had shot. After some food and drinks, as explained elsewhere, I showed them their artwork. They were eager to see something but could not do so, asking me why there was so much blur and no images. Apparently they thought they needed to move the camera in order to capture everything in movement. This way the occasion was lost in the hands of both sisters. It was, as I said before, like an omen of things yet to be. But at least I was able to capture some of our special day, and this is where one could see Magda's parental home and the black Mercedes arriving to pick us up and take us to the venue where we had our special engagement party. I'm hoping that I will be able to find that footage after all this time. I normally preserve memorabilia by transferring it onto more advanced digital equipment as it became available, but I cannot be sure of my wonderful daughters might have destroyed them amidst other things they could put their hands on. The note Magda had received from the local authorities warning her about the dangers of marrying Middle Eastern people of Islamic background and that Muslims do not respect human rights, treating their wives contrary to Western values, still haunts me even today. When marrying such a person, she needed to consider those possible problems. For instance, she might be forced to wear a veil or burqa to hide her chastity and womanhood from all other men, or even be forced to become Muslim. She had to be cautious when being involved with a Muslim man, because she might even be beaten or punished severely according to their traditions. I still think how absolutely ugly such a communication was. I was not going to leave it at that. And although Magda did not want to do anything about it, I could sense how concerned she felt. Therefore I needed to find the author of that letter within the relevant department and clarify matters. One needed to explain to them that I was not a Middle Eastern, was not from that religious background. Besides, we were already married. I certainly did not adhere to any religious traditions, and was of Armenian background. However, I was told point-blank that there was no difference between whoever I was and the Turks. Everybody was the same. It seemed that both Turks and Armenians apparently originated from Muslim countries and therefore followed the same traditions, belief systems, and culture. It was indeed a very ugly assault to my person, and a very low-grade assumption. I believed that people employed within such a government department should represent their supposed supreme culture. If I had taken them to the court of justice over such ugly treatment, it would have created a detrimental picture of their national pride. However, I still think that it was ignorance on their part of that unfortunate person, but none of this stirred Magda. Unfortunately, knowing how easily influenced she could be in the long run, it could present major problems in our relationship. My observations of her were not wrong, for she proved me correct right down to the finest detail. After our wedding, we remained at that dwelling above the chemist's shop. I remember my secret celebrations of Christmas and New Year, which Magda considered to be just like any other time of the year, a time to relax, doing ordinary household chores, or an unfortunate time when people were engaged in pagan worship, which we were not permitted to take part in, as allegedly commanded by God. In my humble way, I was celebrating socially significant times of the year, wishing for the whole world to become more peaceful, culturally and scientifically advanced, while toasting the joyful season. I enjoyed recording the sounds of people, friends and relatives, as well as the events of the fun people enjoyed, for I never wanted the happy times to end. By listening to them later, I could still feel that joy, especially during times of desperation and sadness. Alas, much of my marital life was going to be just that, desperation and sadness. Without being overly critical, some people, like the majority of Jehovah's Witnesses, including Magda, prefer complete dullness in their lives, without thinking about it. Those types of people usually claim, "What is there to feel joy?" or celebrate life. By listening to those reel-to-reel recordings, more memories are fondly remembered, our pasts remaining alive. Without memories, humans do not seem to evolve into more mature and creative ways of living. Without memories, a dull and almost plant-like existence is achieved. My interest in recording or filming, collecting records, or playing a musical instrument has always been severely criticized in every possible way by those who could not value their own lives nor appreciate anything beautiful in the world. Almost all witnesses, and my wife, belong to that category. Completely opposite to my nature, making one question how long such a marriage could last. Whenever I listen to those recordings, I still feel amazed how other memories come rushing in with renewed freshness. When we had to move out and settled in a beautiful small cottage amongst multicolored roses, which I often photographed, it was where we had an addition in our lives. Now I was recording the everlasting cries of baby Annette Samuela. She was never happy after her grandparents' input, having tantrums until she got what she wanted. In fact, her crying day and night was extremely unusual. But medical opinion was that there was nothing physically wrong. She was simply highly strung, and would grow out of it. But she never did. I am so happy to have recorded all those memories and taken so many photographs. Looking at those mediocre images from our wedding day, but not during our unique holiday and stay at the Hotel Turkai, listening to the recordings of Magda's parents and endless cries of baby Annette, makes one realize how important those living memories are. In one of the recordings, Magda was explaining how Annette had vomited over her shoulder and all over her chest, and that the gluey substance was completely black in color. when she hugged her for the very first time ever. Annette's grandparents remained unusually protective of her, claiming at every opportunity that she was theirs, and I had nothing to do with her, as one can clearly hear in those recordings. At every opportunity they made sure that I understood that the child was not mine. Whenever they were around, when I was changing the nappies, while Magda occupied herself with something else, Emilia would grab the baby, shouting, "She's not yours. She's our baby. Yaygulu, yaygulu." It is all discreetly recorded, but if you ask me to translate what those unusual words mean, I cannot help you. Emilia shouted many times, "Keep your hands off her." On the other hand, Magda has always been against my interests, particularly those which she considered as electronics, and thoroughly hated them. I used to wonder, as I still do, about what the significance of her behavior against my wishes was. Samuel, on the other hand, always made sure to utter words like, "Long time from now, those recordings will be no more." However, even then, I thought they will last much longer, even after you are gone, my friend. I would not say anything, as I preferred golden silence. I have kept them despite all the objections and hostilities I was subjected to. Magda remained extremely biased and believed that I was only interested in electronics. I wonder how she feels about the existence of those recordings now. She would probably think of them as being charmed, and have nothing to do with them, as per her witness lord's dictates. While we lived in that cottage, Magda showed considerable hostility towards my memorabilia, photographs, and recording tapes from my past, and those of current times, considering them as just clutter. She never respected my desire to sort them out and store them properly. I find it very hard to forget that day when, coming home from work and wishing to look at them, she said she had packed and put them in the attic. "Well," she said, "you can be happy now. At least all that clutter and rubbish is gone." A few days later, much to her disgust, I took them down to sort them, but to my dismay they were all destroyed. And again, as mentioned, I cried upon discovering that even in such a short period of time, all those photographs and their negatives, as well as my reel-to-reel tapes containing many sound recordings of my school friends from Paris and Ankara, and my grandparents' valuable photographs and Super 8mm films, were either moldy or completely water-damaged. I could not rescue any of them, and no photographer would attempt to do anything. They were beyond repair. Despite seeing how stressed I was, Magda was not stirred. She would never apologize for something she considered simply junk. Instead, she said, "You know, life is more important. You can replace them." I could not understand how one could replace them. Did she by any chance think that I could go back in time and take those pictures again, and record those sounds of my past once more? They were lost for good. At least the ones I kept in my leather briefcase were safe. I have preserved all my surviving photographs and recordings throughout the years. I still feel devastated and disappointed about all those memories I lost with her assistance. It made me realize even then that this unfortunate marriage could not last. It was probably going to become a test of endurance for a lengthy period of time, and I was not at all ready for it. She often told me respect must be earned, but she never respected me. Our dreamt of love became nothing more than theatrics and extremely artificial from then on. Often she treated me like a child in front of other Jehovah's Witnesses, as if needing to teach me proper manners. She kept asking me if I said thank you to them when they spent some time with us, or when they offered us a little gift. She constantly preached that I must first think of my priorities, whatever they were supposed to be. I thought I was missing something vital here, and was not aware of it. Maybe she was more knowledgeable and experienced in these things than I. Even when making love before reaching the climax, she would pull herself away, going to the kitchen to get an apple or glass of milk, then asking me to continue on her return. I tried to visualize and hoped things would change for the better, and that we needed to give it a little more time, but this attitude continued and became more extreme on her part. I still remember how often she declared that she was thankfully in the truth, or else she would most certainly make a good whore. Certainly, anybody with that attitude could be that. Maybe when we went to Australia, or perhaps had another child, it would change the situation if that child was from me, unlike her first one. But would it? I am so thankful for her parents reminding me forever that child was theirs. Could a leopard change its spots? Confused and distraught, I decided to wait patiently. My supposed marriage did not seem to have the important ingredients to create a home, and so I started to agonize about me making a huge mistake. It might have been just to please some people, a number of her relatives, and a huge number of her only friends, the Jehovah's Witnesses. I was hearing colorful stories about how destructive their cultist movements have been by listening to a number of individuals and their families. I never believed that this could also be my experience. I trusted that my wife loved me in her own way, just as I loved her. However, I must have been very naive and a foolish dreamer.